Welcome everybody to a look at the second film in the Psycho collection, which means that we're going to be looking at Psycho 2 from 1983. So directed by Richard Franklin, who also did the really rather fantastic Road games, as well as Patrick, Link, and FX2, the sequel to FX, The Art of Illusion or something it was called like that. But yeah, this is basically a psychological slasher. Clocks in at 113 minutes long. Stars once again Anthony Perkins and Vera Miles, returning in their original roles from the first film. Also stars Robert Lagaya, who was in the likes of Scarface, Independence Day, as well as its sequel, and The Ninth Configuration. So after years of treatment at a mental institution for the criminally insane, serial killer Norman Bates is finally released. Deciding to move back into his long-dead mother's infamous old house, he soon finds himself tormented by her demands and begins to question his own sanity. So, despite everything that this had going against it in terms of expectations and carrying on the story that was started more than 2 decades ago before this, it works on the whole thanks to a few crucial decisions. Firstly, bringing back Anthony Perkins and Vera Miles from the original film was a wise decision, as they are both not only great in their roles, but also give us a sense of familiarity with their presence, which eases us into the plot as a whole. The score by Jerry Goldsmith is superb, although not quite as good as Bernard Herrmann's. But what really anchors this film down and makes it so good is the script by Tom Holland, which gives us plenty of character depth and twists to keep this entire film engrossing. The supporting cast is also solid. It is well paced. It looks good. Features the same type of humour that was so present in Hitchcock's films. So that's kind of a continuation of his kind of, style of filming. And though the film does stray into slasher conventions of the time, we do at least get a couple of gruesome kills done really, really rather effectively. So, yeah, I imagine there was a great deal of weight on the filmmaker's shoulders when coming up with this film because, Psycho is a classic. It was a huge hit. And then obviously you got the legacy of Hitchcock himself, and to release a sequel after 23 years alone would have been a daunting task. There's very few sequels that have come out after such a huge amount of time and actually been good, let alone nearly rivaling their original films. Now, I'm not saying for a moment that this is as good as the original film. It, like I said, definitely does conform to more conventions than that film did. But at the end of the day, Psycho pretty much made those conventions in its own right. So, yeah, it is a little bit more predictable in terms of some of the conventions that it goes with. But at the end of the day, the characterization of Norman Bates is really well done. It, expands upon him as a character from the first film, but it doesn't over-explain things. You know, how there's so many prequels and sequels and the like from these days that try and explain every little detail going, but this doesn't do that. It doesn't, overemphasize on the little details and all the backstory of Norman Bates. There are hints of it here and there, but it's more about how he's dealing with all of these things after 23 years and then the apparent murders that are going on that he's convinced that he's done. So, and the 4K itself looks excellent, by the way. So the main reason to revisit this is because of the 4K. I've seen this plenty of times already to be familiar with the film, so I wasn't bowled over by watching it again, but I was enjoying the film looking in its 4K format, so there is that going for it. And then minor spoilers, but there are some art cards with this, which all have that on the back of it. So there's Vera Miles herself, 23 years after playing the original role. There's Meg Tilly as technically the second lead character. And there's Anthony Perkins himself. Definitely looking older than he was in the original film, but then again, he was 28 in that original film, so he was hardly young in that film either. And then we get the really nice double-sided poster, which has the new artwork on it, as you can see. Again, like the previous film, this goes for a different kind of colour scheme, so blue as opposed to red. And then we have the original poster on the back, which I've always really liked. I like its simplicity. I like the red border around the shot from the film, big title at the top, and then all your usual credits at the bottom. It's really, really nicely done. So, cracking film. Obviously, there are some people out there that slate this film purely because it is a sequel to Psycho. Although I imagine if it wasn't and it was a little bit different in terms of the characterization, they'd still enjoy it. But as a sequel, It's way better than anyone could expect it to be, and then some. It's good in its own right, but it's also a really, really good sequel to the original film. So get out there and see it if you haven't already. I imagine a lot of people have been put off by watching this because, you know, it is a sequel to a classic horror film, but trust me, it is well worth the watch. And like the sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey, it's got its own things going for it, just like 2010, the year we made Contact, had its own things. I mentioned 2001 because that is obviously another sequel from original classic film from the 60s that had a sequel in the 80s, right around the same time as this, by the way. And yet people were put off by the sequel purely because of the original film, how great that was. So, yeah, it's much like that film, 2010, where this is far better than you'd expect it to be for a sequel to a classic film. So, yeah. But if you have seen it, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. But nonetheless, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.